When I first started contributing towards the Web3 industry, I was initially very focused on how these networks could develop a really good funding process, as that could then help with creating a better circular economy, which should make the ecosystem more sustainable over the long term, but it could also help with being effective for fueling faster growth and adoption in the short term. I initially started contributing towards one Web3 ecosystem, but then eventually realized my analysis was relevant to all Web3 ecosystems. So this is why I started the Web3 Association, which has the broad goal of fixing the incentives. Getting the incentives right was always going to be a big part of solving the alignment problems you have in these complex systems. Incentives are going to influence how a network should generate income for the treasury, and also how it needs to create a funding process that can retain strong performing contributors and that can consistently generate impact. Realistically, if any Web3 network was going to thrive over the long term, it was going to need to align the incentives to attract top performing talent. Skilled contributors need to be well compensated so that they're going to stay and continue working in that ecosystem over the long term. Retaining strong performers is incredibly important for existing corporations that we see today, and that very same thing is true for Web3 ecosystems as well. Contributors should also become more valuable over time as they really get to know the ecosystem and how to develop applications and smart contracts. And then this can help with creating those impactful solutions. So what I started thinking about was how could you make sure these contributors are rewarded fairly based on the amount of contributions they're making and also be rewarded for the value and impact of those contributions. What you want to know is which contributors have been the most performant and impactful, and then consider how you can retain those contributors over the long term. And the immediate problem you have is the full value of someone's contributions are commonly not known at the time they make that contribution. It could take months or years to really see what the real impact was from a specific contribution. And this is problematic, as if you rewarded people based on how valuable their contributions were and it wasn't yet clear in the short term, well, then it could result in those contributions being undercompensated as you don't yet know the full value. So you needed a solution where contributors could be rewarded in the future when it was clearer how valuable each of their contributions was. Some form of a historical review of previous contributions. Without that, you might end up just incentivizing short-term thinking, where someone only focuses on things that make some form of impact that is immediately visible and not longer-term projects that could require more planning, research, collaboration, and execution effort before they can be properly implemented to generate any impact. And these longer-term projects could be far more impactful overall, but due to the incentives that might exist, people could be less likely to work on them. So, whilst I was thinking about this problem, I realized something. It might often take more than a year or multiple years to fully understand the impact that someone's contribution has made. And that makes sense. But in nearly all cases, there is often at least some reasonable period of time where the impact could eventually be understood. It's rare to have a situation where a contribution is going to make impact for eternity. Now, there are some arguable exceptions to this, and one example of an extraordinary contribution that so far has been generating ongoing impact every day could be the contributions from Tim Berners-Lee. So, Tim was the inventor of the World Wide Web and developed things like HTML and HTTP. And if you're watching this, you'll be one of the many people that are benefiting from these technologies on any of the days that you go online. But these types of contributions are more of an exception and not the norm. Think about every single person on Earth and all of the contributions that they make every single day. How many of those would be generating impact over the very long term, like over 20 years? Is it also reasonable to say that within 5, 10, or 20 years, it should be feasible to understand most of the value and impact of any certain contribution? In most situations, I think that is the case. So then a light bulb went on in my head. I was connecting the dots between the company share structures that I had previously spent a lot of time thinking about when I was working in startups, and then comparing these ideas with how you could align the incentives in Web3 to properly reward contributions in a funding process. I suddenly realized what was fundamentally wrong with how companies across the world are structured. But let's save that for the next video.